Welcome to the Enlighten Up podcast, where I am going to take you into a deep exploration of what it means to exist in this current reality. We are going to raise your vibes, open your mind, expand your heart, and dive deep into the wondrous mysteries and possibilities of this lifetime. There's been a spiritual catalyst that has set in motion the awakening process of many across the globe to return to the knowingness of self and unite what has been separated. Together, we're going to bring light into that darkness. We're going to remember the joy of living. But most of all, we're going to turn up the volume of our own eternal power and do the thing we're here to do. Welcome back to the Enlighten Up podcast, everyone. Today, you are in for a very beautiful spiritual retreat. Okay, let me...
Start over.
Yeah, start over. All right, one more second. Okay. Welcome back to the Enlighten Up podcast, everyone. Today, you're in for a spiritual treat because I am joined by someone who's in my alchemy program, but has been a client of mine and also is a friend, I consider. Dave Kaser has been on his spiritual journey for quite some time, and he's going to take us through all of the ups and downs, but he's going to take us through what I feel like is something that so many people love to hear, and it's some of the very interesting moments that he experienced in his QHHT sessions, as well as a profound experience most recently had when he returned to Avalon through a very intense meditation experience. Right, Dave?
Right.
Yeah. Well,
Absolutely.
Dave, welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
I know everyone in alchemy is like, can you please get Dave on the podcast? He has so many interesting stories to share. And so we finally have you here, and you've been on an incredible journey. And we're going to talk about how that unfolds. I mean, guys, we're going to get into Egypt. We're going to get into being buried in a coffin alive. We're going to be talking about all different fears that come up in your lifetime now and why you have them and how they relate to your past lives. But Dave, your spiritual journey started in the 70s.
That's right. Approximately about 1977, 78.
Okay, so when I was born.
Oh, so it's older than you. All right.
Your spiritual journey is older than me.
Yeah, so what happened there, I mean, as a kid growing up, I was always fascinated by the unknown, the occult. I mean, things like Chariots of the Gods was a famous book back then, and you couldn't get a lot of information. I mean, back then you had to go to the library or try to order a book and wait weeks to get it. And so there wasn't much to get, but I was always fascinated by that stuff. In fact, my mom and I actually used to talk about reincarnation, which was kind of unusual. But I had my first metaphysical event happen in about 1977, sometime I'm trying to remember, when after the book Amityville Horror came out, and all the kids were reading it. I had no interest, but they were reading it and said, okay, I'm going to read it. And it was a time we had guests over, and true to what would happen in my home, when we had company staying, they kicked me out of my bed. I got stuck in the basement, and then they got my bedroom. So I'm in the basement, which is not the best place to be reading Amityville Horror. But I was reading it, and I started questioning, are there really ghosts? Is this really true? Is there such a thing? And all of a sudden, I had this instantaneous flash of like all-knowing. Something I always wanted to know. I want to know everything. And then as fast as it came, it was gone. And the only thing I can remember about it was the complete and utter emotion of love and bliss. And it was just a beautiful experience.
Wow, but just from reading that book.
No, just that experience where that microsecond when I asked the question, are these ghosts real?
Okay.
Okay, and that's what I got. And I'll explain to you here in a moment what happened in a QHHT session when I asked about that. But the other thing that was funny that happened after that, I was like, okay, wow, that was wild. I got up and I went and took a shower. This is the funny side of the story. So I went and took a shower, and I'm standing in the shower and I'm asking the same question, a ghost real, or what is this? And I just said to myself, I looked up at the shower and I said, if ghosts are real, turn the water red. Okay, I looked up, I looked down, and my washcloth is red. Okay, my heart starts pounding. I look up, I look down, it's gone. I didn't know what that was. I looked up, I looked down again, it was red again. And I'm just freaking out. And for no reason that I can think of, I got a nosebleed and it turned the water red.
Oh.
And and now I look back and I think, why didn't I ask for purple or green or something? But it was red. And okay, so after that experience, I said, okay, I got it. This stuff's real. And I threw the book away and I didn't touch it anymore. Now, to leap ahead in the story, if you'd like, in my last QHHT session, I asked about that. I said, what was that? What happened in that flash and the nosebleed? And what my higher self told me was that they actually pulled me out of my body and took me to a much higher dimension and showed me everything. But that was way too much knowledge or information or energy. They said, had we allowed you to remember it, your body would not have survived. So we had to wipe it, and to put you back in your body. I thought, okay, well, that's pretty wild. And they said, we did that because we wanted you on this journey. We wanted you on this spiritual journey. And this is just another prize along the path, so to speak, they called it. Now, what happened when the red was my higher self has a really nice sense of humor. They said they said he just wouldn't shut up about this ghost stuff. He just wouldn't shut up. So we punched him in the nose. That's what they said.
Oh my gosh.
So that's what turned the water red. No, my higher self has a really good sense of humor.
Yes.
But that's where that came from.
I mean, that's funny. That's really funny. For a second, I thought, they took you to a much higher dimension and the altitude just caused the nosebleed or
Oh,
something,
yeah.
like, because that happens to me a lot when I go into the mountains, but that's really funny. Um, so it's interesting too. That's a very important part to note that you weren't allowed to remember everything because your physical body wouldn't be able to handle that. That speaks to the level of vibration you need to be at in order to handle that much light coming in, because that's light is basically information, right?
Right, absolutely.
Or I should say information is light.
Right.
So, okay, so you had this moment back in the 70s. And then did anything in your life change? Like, so were you just continuing to read books or like what happened?
Well, not a whole lot that I can remember. I mean, I was in college. I mean, your college years are kind of wild. And get college, went into my first job, and he was there a number of years. And somewhere around in about 87, 1987, I took a field service job. So we had a 1-year-old child. We packed up the car, trailer, off we went for 2 months. And I started reading this stuff again. Edgar Casey was, available. Shirley MacLaine had a book out. I mean, it's still hard to get information, but there are a few things out there. And I can remember distinctly telling my wife that I don't know why I'm reading this, but I have to read it. I cannot put this down. So obviously there's a message there, right? There's
Mhm.
something going to happen. And sure enough, after we were gone for 11 months, 10 months in, after we'd put everything we owned in storage, the storage place burned down, all gone. I mean, wedding albums, wedding
Oh,
pictures, my wife's artwork, some of our treasures, and and literally everything's furniture, and cheap stuff too. But
up in
and I
flames.
said, it dawned on me. Now I know why I had to read that stuff. Because I looked at my 1-year-old son and he said, he's not upset. Why should I get upset? That's just material stuff. Yeah, it was important and we miss it and we treasured it, but in the end, it's just stuff. It's not life. And I looked at my son, he's happy, and off we went. And that reawakened it for me into the 90s. And again, there wasn't much you could do. I remember, yeah, we tried to go to church, and my family's always been in the Methodist church, and so I got into the Bible study. And I wanted to talk about things like reincarnation. So I remember bringing up something, and then afterwards, the preacher's wife who ran it, she says, "Dave, we can't talk about those things here. I agree with you, but we can't talk about it." I said, "Okay, that's not going to work for me then." And and so we left. We did find the Unity Church had an interesting pastor who would talk about these things, and he would talk about ancient wisdom. He introduced me to the readings and teachings of Manly Hall, which is very philosophical stuff, kind of heavy stuff too. But and I meditated. I tried a lot of different things. That was my first trip to Sedona was in the late 80s, back when it wasn't so crowded. And I remember, let me tell you one story. So I went to a psychic fair in Sedona. And this was another one of those moments that makes this stuff real. So in this thing, they had us pair up, and so this gal, and they said, "Okay, now go to opposite sides of this ballroom. Sit down on the floor, facing the wall. Don't look at each other, and close your eyes." And they did a little meditation. And they said, "Okay, now in your mind's eye, get up, walk towards your partner." Okay. And guys, what you're going to do is you're going to put your hand on the small of her back, and you're going to, hold her hand. And ladies, you're going to put your hand on his shoulder, and then dance, and just dance. And I said, me being the guy that tests everything, I said, I'm not going to do that. Okay. I'm going to put my hand on her shoulder. And, okay, it's over. He says, "Okay, now, meditation's over. Get up, go to your partner and talk about your experience." And I can distinctly remember her walking towards me, and she's waving her finger at me. And she's going, "You didn't follow the instructions. You put your hand on my shoulder." And I said, "Oh, wow." And again, it's just one of those moments that says we are all connected.
Hmm.
Um, I've since tried some experiments with people where they could remote view and stuff similar like that, but that was just amazing. But the 90s were an interesting time. I had one group, we actually went firewalking, which was an amazing event. Have you ever heard of firewalking?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And you walk about 4 or 5 steps through the coals and you don't get burned. And
Yeah.
it's a state of mind thing. So it's fantastic. But then life gets a hold of yourself again. And it kind of went aside. We moved to Tucson here and, got kids to raise. I got a career, and it all took a back seat, and it was kind of left it alone for a number of years until 2021.
Ah,
Uh, you know,
the beautiful era of COVID.
Oh, I know. Okay, so I went through 2020, which was all about COVID and being scared to death and fear and all sorts of things. The election didn't help. That was all crazy stuff going on in the world. In January of 2021, I remember distinctly getting this feeling, message, something that said to go outside and stare at the mountain. And so we have a mountain just outside. I'm standing in the front yard staring at the mountain, and it's just gorgeous. The colors were intense. It was just beautiful. I just stood there for, I don't know, good 10 plus minutes. Wasn't even dressed for the day yet. This was early in the morning. And I got to thinking, I said, I don't know what's going on in the world, but I'm here to help. And I just put that out into the universe. And that reawakened so much. And I said, I got to catch up on all the modalities, what's going on, where's the information, what can I learn? That's where I found you.
Mhm.
Probably one of the first people I found online, as you know. And I followed you for a while before in alchemy. And like, I always liked the way you made the spiritual perspectives real to us today. Okay, like I said, you're the practical mystic.
Yes, Dave is the one who
And
dubbed me practical
yeah,
mystic,
yeah.
which I
So
have. taken on like very adoringly. I
Yeah.
love it's so perfect. So I appreciate your
And and
assistance in that.
and you and I have had. I went to some of your workshops. We've had some profound healing things
Mhm.
happen in those
Yeah,
workshops.
the womb of
And
activation was very powerful for you.
oh, the womb of activation, the forbidden journey.
Mm. The
And
generational trauma healing class.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we talk about that, and it came up. I did some generational and past life healing in those sessions. And actually, in one of my hypnosis sessions, it came out that I was doing a good job of healing those things. That was one of the contracts I came in with, was to heal those generational things.
Hmm.
So I was thinking as I was walking the dog this morning, I said, I wonder if Nicole and I have a contract in there somewhere to do this together. You know what I
I
mean?
yeah, I totally believe that we do. I loved what happened in the womb of activation for you because as a man and taking that course, many may think, well, why would I take that? Because that's for females, but
Right.
we all have a creative womb, including men. For you, do you want to just quickly share what came up for
Oh,
you through that
sure.
awakening?
Sure. And I only took it on a whim because you said, guys could go, okay, well, I enjoy these experiences. And I
The
said,
guys who came had
and
profound
yeah,
experiences.
I
Yeah.
wasn't expecting a profound experience, but I thought I just enjoy doing this stuff. And so I took it, and a couple of things happened. One, I was the day of the class, I got ready, took a shower. And in the shower, there's water, and water has always been important to me. And I get my best thinking in the shower. But I was in the shower, and all of a sudden, I recognized I had all these female energies around me, and they were all thanking me for doing this. I thought, okay, that's different. It was important that I do this. Okay, so I'm all set. Let's go. And in one of the meditations, we were there, and again, this room was full of women. My past lives as women, probably my generational women. I mean, it was literally, and they had their hands on me, and I can't see these energies, but I know they're there. I
You
can
sense
kind
them.
of sense them. They had their hands on me. They were a big part of that experience. It got extremely emotional for me because I knew I was healing not just my generations, but my past lives as a woman. And I distinctly remember four past lives that came to me as a woman during that experience.
Yeah, I
And
think it was through the clearing ceremony of the sacral chakra.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it was extremely powerful.
Yeah, to have all of those ancestors and past versions of yourself that were female show up for that
Right,
healing. That was like
right,
really that I love that because I myself never anticipated anything like that happening. But to know that even as the man in this lifetime, that you were able to heal through like ripples of timelines, all the different versions of yourself that are female and all
right,
your female ancestors showed up for that healing. And through you, it all flowed
right, right.
and was
It,
received. Hmm.
it
That was
is very
beautiful.
important, and we'll talk later in hypnosis stuff that was an important thing for me to do
Yeah.
for my own journey and my next steps, kind of thing.
So, okay. So let's get to your QHHT sessions because they're
Oh, let me say one more
phenomenal.
thing.
Okay.
So that was the female side, but if you
Yeah.
remember in the Forbidden Journey,
Oh, yes. In the generational trauma
where
healing
yeah,
class.
generational trauma, where there was one part where we were to walk through something, and all of the men of my past lives and ancestors were standing in line behind me, following me.
Hmm.
So I hit the female side and the male side during
You
these
did.
two sessions. So
Yes, that's right. It's right. So you were able to clear both
right,
lines, the both the feminine and the masculine sides of your generations, as well
right,
as yourself, through two different instances. I know that was absolutely wild, very
right,
powerful.
right.
It also speaks to how committed you are in your journey.
Yeah,
Considering, I know your spiritual journey is older than me, but it's really just only been amping up over the last 4 or 5 years, right?
Right.
So
Right.
you have been very interested in Dolores Cannon and the QHHT sessions. And so do you want to share what happened in your first QHHT session? Because it's very powerful.
Sure, sure. Yeah, it was interesting to me when I've discovered Dolores Cannon because I didn't discover her till 2021. She'd been around, started getting popular in the 90s, and I didn't even know it. And so I
Hmm.
had a lot. I was like, this is incredible. This modality, hypnosis. I need to try that. And the reason being is I wanted myself to tell me about me. That's what really brought me to the QHHT materials was it's going to be my higher self telling me about me.
Best way to do it.
So yeah. So I went into that and I can remember and again I sensed when we started, but right before we started getting into him, I sensed that the room was full of my guides and stuff. In fact, I told the practitioner, I said, this room's crowded. This is really crowded. And I didn't know what to expect with the hypnosis, but the way it's working today is you're not completely out like the old hypnosis where you don't even remember. You're in a state where you're conscious and you can remember and you're talking, your higher self is talking or someone other entity, your guide is talking and you know it's not you. And you don't even talk like that. And
Yeah.
the voice inflections are different, and it's kind of wild. And so typically the way these work is you start at a place. The my understanding that this is all the whole startup of how this works is proprietary, but you start in a place and they ask you, what do you notice? And I'm going to tell you something we have never told really anybody about how this one started.
Hmm.
This one, I didn't want to, what they say, come off the cloud and land. I didn't want to, but I got pulled down. And as soon as I got pulled down and hit the ground, I felt these men holding me down or, holding me down for some reason. I couldn't move. And next thing I know, I'm in a box. I'm underground in a box, coffin, I guess. Old wood. And at first I was a little freaked out, but then after that, I just kind of accepted it. Okay, well, I'm in this box. Okay, there's some dirt here, but okay, now what do I do? What's going to happen? And I knew I couldn't get out. And to this day, I don't know really what that means, other than as I was sitting there, I got pulled out by my crown
Okay.
chakra. I got pulled out of the box um, and put on a mountainside, and then I started that journey. But again, I don't know what I was told by my higher self that meant rebirth. That was a version of rebirth, renewal, something along those lines.
Yeah, it's interesting that you went to a mountainside top kind of right after because that obviously indicates getting a much higher perspective. Um, do you know anything about who you were when you were buried in that coffin? Any details at all, or do you just know you were in a box?
I didn't sense I was a past life or anything. It just like me
Oh,
in
okay.
there.
Hmm. I mean, it could be a rebirth. I mean, I would be more inclined to go with what you feel, from your own higher self, because that it was your intention going in. And so I would definitely lean more into that than someone
Yeah,
else's version.
yeah. So that's what I think. It's interesting. I wasn't. afraid of it. And the only other thing is, I remember later when my higher self was talking about, it, I said, "Yeah, I was in the box, and, at least there's no worms here in the dirt." I thought that's kind of strange, but interesting. But
So you in this session, you were on the mountaintop. Um, you met a bobcat? Is that what happened?
well, yeah. So typically in these sessions, you go to a past life first,
Yeah.
and you explore that, and then the about the second half of it, you're under hypnosis, you're inviting the higher self to talk about why did you show him that? Why did that happen? What was that? I didn't really do it that way. I started on this mountaintop and I was at a cabin. Have these cabins in the mountains so hikers that get lost in the weather can stay there. And this big, massive storm came. It scared me at first, but then it cleared and I left the cabin and I started walking downhill. And I had experiences as I was walking down the mountain. And one of them was this bobcat that you brought up. And the reason this is so interesting is in Tucson, it's not unusual to have bobcats, coyotes, and javelina, other kind of animals around. But prior to this session, 2 to 3 months, a bobcat showed up at our house and hung around, and we would see it almost every day. And that's very unusual
Mm.
to have one hang around that much. I've got pictures of the bobcat, um, and it was just very unusual. And in the session, I was walking down and I saw the bobcat. And, he turned and was walking back into the forest. And the practitioner said, "Why don't you talk to him?" Okay, hello, bobcat. Why are you here? And the bobcat said, "I'm leaving now. You don't need me anymore." I thought, okay, that's interesting. Okay. And literally after that session, we didn't see the bobcat anymore after that. It'd been around for at least 2 months and we didn't see him again. Actually, I saw him about a month later and I was thinking about the bobcat coming out of my garage and there it was walking by the side of my house going off. And I was thanking him and off he went. But my higher self said that they sent the bobcat into my 3D reality because I don't necessarily believe that they, my higher self guides, are always with me.
Mm.
So as they sent the bobcat in the physical to demonstrate to me that they're always here. They're
Like the
always
bloody
with me.
nose.
Like the bloody nose. Yeah,
Like,
so
we don't need to punch you in the face this time. We're going to give you a bobcat.
we give you a bobcat.
That's funny. I'm kind of giggling because just a little synchronicity here. My boyfriend calls me a bobcat
Oh,
when I
really?
when I have a drink or two. He's like, "Oh, the bobcat comes out." A little feisty, but that's funny. So it's important to have these moments to give yourself the confirmation that it increases your awareness in your current reality, right? Your physical
Right.
3D reality. And it allows you to also engage that reality through the higher realms, meaning asking for signs like red water, in the shower, or, like imagining seeing, the reason why you saw the bobcat is because you were so linked already that, it was already speaking to you that you then
Right.
saw it. So having these connections are very important to developing not just your own intuition, but your belief, because that's the most important thing, right? Your belief is what starts to shape your reality. So as your belief starts to change, so does your reality. You mentioned too in this QHHT session that you do remember you were reminded of why you have a fear of lawyers.
Oh,
Do you want to share what happened?
sure. So again, when I was very young, I want to say third grade or something, with encyclopedias. And I remember seeing this picture of the sacrifice that they did, the Aztecs, the Mayans, did where they cut the heart out of the person, take him up on the mountain, kind of, and there's Apocalypto's the movie they show about that. And I distinctly remember that picture ever since forever. And one of my concern is why do I have this fear of lawyers, the law and lawyers? And so I asked about it in that session, and it hadn't come up yet, but all of a sudden I saw under hypnosis, I saw that picture again, and I realized it that was one of my past lives. That I was one of those sacrifices. And what I got, and this was very emotional. I mean, I just teared up like crazy because what I realized, or what I remembered about that was that I wanted to be helpful to our community, our civilization.
And this was during the Mayan
It,
times.
yeah. Yeah. Again, I don't know if it's Mayan or Aztecs, but I think
Yeah, I know it's hard to, yeah.
The Aztecs did a lot more of it than the Mayans did. But what happened was there was this man of the law who talked me into doing this, that it would be a good thing, you would be helping, and he tricked me into doing this. And I think that is where that fear of lawyers came from, was that, and what happened to me, and in that, I mean, it was, what these practitioners tell you, if you get emotional, it's real. You can't fake emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so
The anytime, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you here, but just so the audience understands, as soon as you have any type of emotion come out, especially when it comes out of nowhere, this is speaking to the fidelity of your experience. Okay, it is rooting you into the truth. So anytime you remember, your body remembers everything. Everything. And so this is why I always speak like your body is one of your greatest messengers. To connect with your body, to have the most amazing relationship with your body is one of the best things you can do for your spiritual journey. And so when you do have these moments of emotional onset that comes out of nowhere, know that this is a deep confirmation of truth for you.
right, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So, okay, so were you were you buried? How were you sacrificed? Do you even know?
well, they cut your heart out while you're
Oh, they cut your
alive,
heart out. Okay, okay.
while you're living on the stand. I mean, like I say, the movie Apocalypto.
Yes, okay.
Sounds very
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's pretty, yeah,
graphic.
yeah, they were very graphic. So here's another thing that I'd love you to share about that particular experience. One, that is a great illustration of how, and so many, I know so many people in the audience relate to this because so many people have the remembrance of being persecuted for speaking up, speaking the truth, maybe being a witch, whatever it might be, and so we understand that came through in that way for you in this lifetime. But also when it comes to this current lifetime and what you're dealing with, you've had a hearing issue, right? Not being able to, was it out of your, which, is it both ears or one ear?
Yeah, both ears.
Both
Very,
ears.
very unusual hearing loss.
Okay. Which started when you were younger?
It started, I remember as a kid, teenager, knowing I was having hearing problems and started wearing earplugs to concerts and things just to try to protect it. But
Okay. Do you want to share with the audience what was revealed about that for you?
yeah, and so what I asked about that, where did that come from? And what I learned was that my natural father and my mother fought all the time. And in the session, they said, you should go talk to your sister about this. And I did. And sure enough, she confirmed they fought all the time. And so when I was in the womb, um, I I began to turn off my hearing. I did not want to hear them fighting. And so I turned it off. I've had that confirmed through a doctor that does kinesiology, where your muscle stuff,
Yep.
and he didn't know about my story, but as he was testing my muscles, And he said, well, let's find out when you lost it. And he worked his way back to the womb also, which is kind of a confirmation.
Yep.
Um, and the hearing loss, I have a very unusual hearing loss. I've lost the speech band. Good low frequencies and very good high frequencies, which most men lose high frequencies. Mine is the speech band because I didn't want to hear them,
Mm.
right? And it's very unusual. Um, and there's a related story. I don't know if you know this part. This is another side story. I had gotten very sick as a baby. Again, my parents were still fighting. I got very sick, like 104 plus fever for 4 or 5 days, which can be very dangerous. And what I learned again under hypnosis was I wanted to die. I did not want to be here any longer. And my mom talked me out of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so I stayed. And I think the reason I asked it was I a walk-in? Did I swap with somebody? And my higher self said, no, I was not a walk-in situation, but she talked you out of it. And so you stayed. Um, anyway, but
Wow.
and I think and you know some of my history with my mother, which has been very powerful, which has taken a lot of healing work that she and I now have a very good relationship. She actually came in during that same hypnosis session, and I could see her face, and she came in and she said she wanted to thank me for what I did for her because when she got sick and I had to take care of her and protect her, and that's another story. But she thanks me for that before for helping her get through all that. And again, if you get emotional, it's real.
Yes. Yes.
So,
I mean, when you start to deepen your journey into the spiritual realms of different dimensions and all of that, you start to understand that anything is possible and that even though someone has passed on, they are still available to you to connect with and
right,
communicate with very openly, very openly. And so it's beautiful that there was a healing that was able to happen there between you and your mom through these connections and the sessions.
right. In a side connection to that, this was back when we were getting ready to move to Tucson. My mom got very sick. She couldn't take care of herself. We had to sell her business, sell her house. Most stressful time in my entire life. And as soon as we moved here, within 2 weeks, she passed. She
Mm.
transitioned. And so that was very difficult for me. Um, and so her confirmation of thanking me for helping her with that. But another one I don't think I've told you in I did a hypnosis, not QHHT session last fall, just to kind of I wanted to follow up on a couple of things. And I've always felt that my grandfather was one of my guides. And he passed when he was about 45 years old. My mom was 16. So her dad transitions when she's 16. It was very rough on her. And he came into that session and he thanked me as well for helping her. He told me, he said, he did not realize the impact that his departing early would mean to her.
Oh,
And he thanked me for taking care of her and getting her through that very tough time of her life, um, since he wasn't obviously there. So,
how old were you during that time?
uh, well, this was in a hypnosis session
Oh, okay.
that he came to me.
No, yes, 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 I understand. But how old were you when he passed?
I wasn't born.
Oh,
My mom was only 16 years old at the
oh,
time.
wait. So how did you help her with that? Is it?
No, when I helped her later in her life, right before she
Oh, I
transitioned,
see. I
and helped her
see.
during that part, and she'd always had been she'd have a had that was tough for her
Mm-hmm.
dealing with the loss of her father that early in her life. And so by helping her, he appreciated the fact that I helped her through that.
Well, yes, and
Get past that.
if you're going to be going through your own death transition, it would bring up past death transitions that
Yeah,
you've experienced with other people. So that makes a lot of sense. So it's beautiful that you've been able to like have these different communication lines opened up through
yeah,
loved ones. One of the things that I know people have found very fascinating about your story is your experience in Egypt recently.
right,
You had quite an activation.
right. Um, so my Egypt story, you and I talked about it. I did a reading and we talked about going
I
international
know, yeah.
travel, and you said, Dave, you got to do this, and I had to get over my own fears, and about that time, these Egypt trips were popping up on Facebook, and I
Mhm.
can't go to that one for this reason, and I'm not sure I want to go with those people. Well, these two QHHT practitioners were putting it on, and they were sponsoring this trip. And I said, that's the one I got to go to because having had a session, I know what it's about. And actually, the tour was full of some of these practitioners. Um, I learned a whole lot about how it works. But anyway, um, I had to go. We got up the courage and we went. And my fascination with the Great Pyramid, if for no other reason, I had to go to the Great Pyramid.
I
I
know.
had to go into the Great Pyramid. And I thought that if the Great Pyramid was, if anything was going to happen, that would be the place.
Well, I mean, considering what has been revealed now, what's
Oh, yeah.
underneath it, the structures, all the cylindrical spiral structures that are underneath there go to show that this is much more than just a temple or a tomb.
Right.
Yeah.
So I had a number of activations. We started off at the Sphinx,
Mhm.
and I had a vision of being underground and meeting some old friends and my boss. I met my boss. We were working down there, working with the records, and that was kind of a simple one. Now I had a couple more profound ones. One of them, my first one, was at the colonnade at the Step Pyramid. And it's these very unique round pillars that have like a brick structure to them. And it's very unusual. It's not very common. And we were getting ready to leave, and I was just walking through there. And again, I got very emotional. All of a sudden, I just was like breaking down into tears. And I'm like, I'm just in this hall of pillars. What's going on? And then it hit me that I had been an initiate at in training at this location. And what these pillars signified was these classes of individuals and would infuse their energy into a brick or multiple bricks, something. And so that if they ever got back together and some of them weren't there, they could still connect to their energy. And I think what happened was I just happened to get close enough to my brick and it all came flooding back. And it was just and then over time it kept coming back about who I was, the kind of teachings, the exercises they did, that we were actually in training, that we were to then be sent out to different parts of Egypt to help the people. Some would help with farming, some would help in the temples, some would help in different places. And we would come back on a regular basis because this was also a place where they had uh, festivals, and would come back and meet as a group, your class, if you will, your graduation class. And so yeah, that was pretty amazing. And
That is, and it really speaks to the power of infusing your own energy into something material. It's like, the Wheel of Time. Are you watching the Wheel of
yeah,
Time?
watching
Okay.
that, yeah.
So, they call it like a Terran, is it Terrangeal or Terrangeal or what is it? I'm so horrible with
Yeah,
pronunciations. But any kind of object that gets infused with all of this energy, and when you hold it, you can draw upon that
right,
energy and
right,
it can do different things. Like it can awaken you, you can remember things. And so sometimes I know people who in this lifetime who have remembered that they had buried something in a past life for them to find in
Oh,
another
wow.
lifetime, this one. And they've been needing to go to that country to go find it, we know wherever it might be. And so it's very, very powerful. Infusing your energy into any kind of object. Like a lot of people will use crystals, but really it doesn't matter. Anything that is of sacred value to you that you want to use that means something to you, you continuously infuse your energy into that, and it can become a very powerful source for you to draw upon and just use in your own spiritual journey.
Right. Well, I think that's like homes. Your homes take on your energy. And if you leave your home empty, they degrade very quickly because they're not, have your energy in them anymore. But
Yeah. So wild that your energy was in a pyramid.
yeah. So the next one I had, my other next one that was really powerful was at the Temple of Horus, and you have an interest in Horus, the Temple of Horus at Edfu. And walking in, you just walk around in the different rooms. And I remember there was one room, and I said, this room just feels really comfortable. I don't know why this room's really comfortable. And there were bats in the ceiling. We just, and anyway, it just felt really good. But okay, that's interesting. And the way these temples are built, there's an area for the public, and then you go a little bit deeper and fewer people go in. And then there's an area down in the center where only the pharaoh and the high priest are allowed to go. And in that temple, there's this hallway that kind of goes around, makes like a horseshoe around that center area. And I remember walking around that horseshoe, and I went into one of the rooms, and I think they said that they used to put statues of the gods, and these higher priests and stuff could go pray in there. I don't know if that's true, but I was walking around, and I got really uncomfortable. I said, "This just does not feel right. I am really uncomfortable," and I worked my way through there really fast. I just got out of there. I said, "This isn't right." And then a little bit later, I wandered off and came back, and then they were letting our tour inside, and everything's, for money. Okay,
Hmm.
shh, shh, come on in. You can come in now, hoping to get tips. So the whole group went in, and I'm like, I don't know if I should go in, but I'm going to go in. And all of a sudden, I got this literally a voice in my head. That doesn't happen very often. It speaks to me this clearly. And it said, "We know who you are, and you don't belong here. But because you're a civilian in this life, okay, we're going to let you come in, but show it respect." Okay. And I think that's why that other room was comfortable. I had worked in this temple, but I had never been allowed into this
Hmm.
part of it in that
Hmm.
in that life. But what I gathered from them saying that to me was not to scare me or anything to kick me out. What they were expressing was, we want you to remember who you are. Okay,
Hmm.
remember your life here. Remember your experiences here. And so it wasn't a fearful thing, but again, as soon as he said time to go, I was the first one
Yeah.
out.
Peace
Okay.
out.
Yeah, so okay, good enough. I've seen enough. And I didn't touch anything in there, and I was very respectful. So there's clearly a connection that
Hmm.
I spent a life there and did something. But
Yeah, I knew you had to go to Egypt. Like it was
yeah,
like, come hell or high water, you got to find a way to go there and get over the fear of the traveling issues, you know?
yeah,
It's the so many of us have memories, and it's why so many of us feel called to specifically Egypt and the pyramids. They are such they're gateways. They're receptors. They're transmitters. You know, like there's so many things that the pyramids are doing beyond just being a structure. And so, like, even just seeing what is now below the surface, beneath the pyramid, is letting us know that again, it's like that spiral, right? That spiral, it's like our DNA, right? And how our DNA is shaped, and how energy moves, like, you know.
Yep.
So those of us who feel really called to it, whether you've gone or you haven't gone yet, um, know the significance of its activation, what it what it can not just activate within us, but also activate around us.
And I remember being in the king's chamber. They let us get in the sarcophagus, for a couple of minutes, and you could just literally feel the hum of this structure, in the box. And the other thing I got in the pyramid was I got a strong sense of the way the initiations would work. How because we know that they used it for initiations. And it won't go into great detail, but you work your way up from the grotto. You come in through a chamber, up through the grotto. That lowest level, which is all dirt, that first one, that's you as just a basic human. You come up and you go into the queen's chamber, which is a little bit bigger, but you still have to bow down. You have to bow down. You come in and you get cleaned up and dressed, and then you go up to the king's chamber, and now you're able to be with the gods. And when you go into, they leave you in the sarcophagus. And it's kind of like the Native Americans have a vision quest. It's the same sort of thing. You're there and you have a experience, out of body, if you
Mhm.
will, experience, kind of experience. Um, and so I got a vision of how that whole thing worked, which was fascinating. But I'm not sure I was ever initiated there, but I don't know, maybe I was, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too, now, actually, I'm just realizing this right now. This is why I love, when we have these conversations, it brings information through. In my second mushroom journey, where I took way too much, probably, for what I really needed, but it was one of the most powerful ones. That's the one where I kept seeing the double yolks after, for like multiple
Yeah,
double
yeah.
yolks. And I was shown the fertility temples in Egypt. And I was also shown how I worked with the sacred sexual feminine energies. And they showed it and I could see it over the pyramids, and they showed the energy like this
Wow.
coming up. So that's really, I'm just realizing that right now. But I think a lot of us have done work in that time. I mean, it was the mystery schools. There's so much energy, such a powerful, powerful vortex. It's probably one of the most powerful vortexes, although I believe there's probably more powerful ones that are buried,
Yeah.
somewhere else that we don't even know about yet. Um, not including the ones that we think are in Antarctica or everywhere else. But from what I understand from a friend of mine who did a lot of remote viewing, he said most of our pyramids are underground, like they're buried. They are not above the Earth's surface right
Right.
now. So, there's a lot that can be brought back there, and of course, as we remember, we bring forth those gifts, that wisdom, the knowing into this particular lifetime. And so there's reasons why you were meant to be activated at that time. And it doesn't necessarily mean it becomes crystal clear in that moment, but when it's the right time, you will have all the right puzzle
Right.
pieces come together.
Right. Right.
And so just because we're kind of running out of time, do you want to kind of on that note finish off what happened recently on your trip to Avalon?
Yeah. Yeah. So this one was wild. So I'm taking an intuitive class. So this was a facilitated meditation, and it was kind of like the last class. So this was kind of the graduation one. And Avalon, we think of King Arthur and stuff, but Avalon was actually an area where the Druids and the Essenes hid out from the Romans, and they had a way of hiding themselves in the mist. And so this meditation started by having us walk through the mist. And by the way, if you could walk through the mist and it cleared up, you're in. Okay, so in meditation, I'm walking through the mist, and next thing I know, I'm in a forest. And I'm walking in this forest, and I come to a lake. By the way, I noticed elementals and animals all around me as I was walking through the forest. They didn't come up close, but then I got to this lake, and it's just beautiful, beautiful crystal clear lake, and it looked like there might have been a village off to the right, over on the other side. And I said, okay, I don't know what's going to happen next, but oh, there's a fire. I'm going to go sit by the fire. And I just sat by the fire and watched. And all of a sudden, across the lake, I see this huge orb of bright white light, just just way off in the distance, and it came closer. And as it got closer and closer, and I realized there's a man walking on the water towards me. I thought, okay, that's interesting. And he got to the shore, and then I recognized it was Yeshua, which is the name that Jesus, his friends and family called him. So it's essentially Jesus. And I thought, oh, wow. And he said, we just communicated telepathically. We didn't really talk to each other. He just said, come walk with me to my village. And we walked over to the village, and I asked him, I said, can I touch you? Because is this real? Can I touch you? And he acknowledged that I could. And for whatever reason, I didn't reach out. I fell to my knees, and I was going to kiss his feet. And he said, he touched my head and he said, no, we are all equals, rise up and be with us, kind of thing. And okay. And we went into the village, and all the people were, he wandered off to go play with the kids. And that's with all the people, and they were real nice and took me in, and we were going to have a meal together. And I can remember sitting there, and they had baked bread, and I could sense the smell of the bread. I can smell things. And I was like, okay, I'm eager to taste it because I could also have that ability. And next thing I know, my higher self pulled me out of that and plucked me into a place that I go in my mind where I meet with other souls. And um I was just sitting there, and my higher self is standing at watch over me, but I'm just sitting there, and this young woman walks up, and she sits down next to me, and she puts her hand on my knee, and on my hand, which was on my knee. She puts her hand on my hand, and she says, everything you've seen is absolutely true. That essentially what she was talking about was after his resurrection, he traveled to Great Britain, Avalon, and lived there with the Essenes um, for quite a while. And she said, everything that you've been shown and know about this is true, and you should share it. And then she left. And this whole meditation was 20 minutes. And it just seemed like hours.
Yeah.
But, you know, anyway, yeah, it was very profound because growing up, I wasn't religious. I never had a whole lot of interest in the New Testament and Jesus
Hmm.
because of the churches and all that,
Yeah.
which came up in a past life, but that's another
Yeah.
another hypnosis session. But for some odd reason, over the last going before this, the last half year or so, year, I've been fascinated by it. The books of Dolores Cannon, the other books, Anna, it just really hit home to me before I had this experience.
Yeah. The Essenes were known for protecting Jesus. And what a beautiful encounter. And thank you for sharing that with
Yeah.
all of us. It's those types of encounters and moments that do change you.
Oh, yeah. And Jesus always said, "Don't worship me." We are all equals. We all have these abilities. What I do, you can do and more.
Hmm.
And I think, and I remember just falling to my knees like anybody else would probably, but him letting me know that we are all equals directly. See, I'm getting emotional right now a little bit from remembering all that, but
I mean, a lot of, I guess, people take the second coming of Christ very literally, but I think many of us understand that it's the coming of Christ awakening within all of us, you
absolutely.
know, that Christ consciousness and the ability to do what he did and more in this lifetime, to no longer need a savior, but to know that we are the ones we have been waiting for, right?
Right. Right.
So, and that is something that is going to be made abundantly in your face over the next 14 years, as we are now in where Neptune, when this airs, Neptune will be in Aries. And this is where, like, that love and light spirituality, that passive healing, just more healing, more healing, more healing. It's like, no, now it's like everything has to hit the pavement. You've got to walk the walk. You cannot just talk about it. You cannot just meditate your way to it. You've really got to embody it, bring it into the physical now, and have your body enacting it here and now. It's really about kind of like the meditation I created in alchemy for us about to help people transition from that Neptune in Pisces to the Neptune in Aries, is it's about the dream dissolving and coming to life now through the fire, right?
Right.
Burning away the fog, burning away the illusions, allowing yourselves to step forward, to put on your spiritual armor, because we will be facing some spiritual warfare ahead of us. Unlike what we are used to. Obviously, we see that all the time. We know it exists and all that, but this is going to be an amped up version of it. So it's time to really like see what you're made out of, you know? Put your spiritual armor on and see what you can do with it.
Right.
And that doesn't mean you're meant to fight or anything like that, but meaning like use your gifts
Well,
responsibly.
right. And for me, with a profound thing, all of this means to me is to recognize that we came here for experiences. That
Hmm.
was our contract. We came here to experience these things. There is no death. Okay, we transition. I like to use new terms. We've transitioned to the other phase of our being. And once you realize that everything happens for a reason, there is no good, there is no evil, there's just experiences, it releases you from all of that pain and guilt and fear and worry. We still have some. I mean, it's
Yeah.
hard to get rid of it all,
Yeah.
but it really makes it much more understandable
Hmm.
in what's going to happen. And it just makes your life freer.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like once you get through the fire, being on the other side, you truly are reborn. And I mean the fire of any obstacle in your life, right? Any challenge that you're facing, that is your own metaphorical fire that your soul is walking through to become reborn, to become stronger. It's your own phoenix rising from the ashes moment every time you overcome an obstacle or a challenge. So it's so important with this Neptune moving into Aries. We're really being called to walk through that fire now, like no more delaying. You can't like kind of dodge it,
Right.
wait for like, like maybe it's going to die down. Like, no, like now the flame is strongest and it's now. It's now. So, well, Dave, thank you so much for sharing all of, I mean, there's so much we could share. Dave is just a wealth of information and experiences, and this is why we love having you as a part of Alchemy. And to anyone who would like to join Alchemy and hear more from Dave, please, I'll leave the link to join in the description below. But it's our own little family, and everyone is very open and very supportive in that group. So it's been a pleasure to have you in there for the last few years and to witness your journey, because you've really gone through leaps, like
Yeah.
it always feels like you're leaping. Like lately it doesn't feel like it's a gradual. It feels like you leap and then you're there and then it's another
Yeah.
leap, and yeah. So lovely. So, is there anything you'd like to say to the audience about the spiritual journey? Any messages that you'd like to pass on, even stuff, maybe something you've learned from your
Yeah.
QHHT?
Well, we talked about the experiences. I would just say that there's a whole lot more good stuff that I love these stories. I love telling stories. I love hearing the stories. And so we didn't even talk about in one session. I actually went through my transition to the
Yeah,
other side.
well, we're going to have you
Yeah.
back.
So yeah. So
Part
yeah.
two.
Yeah. And no, I just love that stuff, and like I say, just recognize that my vocabulary is changing. I was thinking about that this morning. It came to me that rather than ask somebody, what do you do? Well, that's just a job. I'm gonna start using tell me about your experiences. What experiences in the future do you want? What experiences have you had? Because that opens up conversations about the things you did good, the things maybe you learned some things from. And like you say, it's time to start using those things and changing our vocabulary, in my opinion, where we can express those more openly to each other in an open and free and comfortable way. So,
Well, with Uranus about to move into Gemini in July, that is more than
uh,
likely to
yeah,
happen. So we will
right.
definitely be liberating ourselves from certain vocabularies and words that we use. So I love that. And it is very important to redefine how we use the language because, as we know, words have a lot of power. So they can either close doors or open doors.
Yep.
Very
Yep.
important. So thank you very much. And to the audience, don't forget the 3 day 180 retreat is coming up. So if you would like to have a groundbreaking spiritual awakening, it is more likely that you will have that at the retreat. There, like I have said, we're kind of batting almost 50% now for Kundalini awakening. So there's that. And also don't forget, if you're looking to get an exit to your healing journey. And I don't mean like you never heal again, but right now, wherever you're at, if you want to finally find that natural completion point so you can start to see the real world transformation, definitely check out my healing exit strategy. Inside that masterclass, you get to see my AI that I created, the Velocity Oracle, and how she looks at your astrology, your body symptoms, and tells you exactly what you need to be focusing on for your healing journey. So that is something that's really exciting that I'm going to be talking about more. Guys, I love you so much. Have an incredible week, and I'll be back with you next time. Thanks again for joining me for another show on the Enlighten Up podcast. I love you guys so much for all of your continued support. So remember to raise your vibe, find your tribe, and be open to the infinite possibilities held in the mysteries that surround us all. Thanks again for sharing the show with your family and friends. And if you're new to the show and you need to find out more information about me, please head on over to my website, NicoleFrolick.com, where you can join my newsletter. And please follow me on Instagram, Telegram, and YouTube. Keep your light bright, and I'll see you next week.